Hi, how's it going? My name is Jared. You're listening to the Jared Show Knowledge Podcast. Thanks for joining me. In this episode, I'll be doing a bit of daydreaming and thinking about what it would be like to grow up in California. It could have happened, and it almost did.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls,
The Jared Show.
want to change the world.
Welcome. I have an announcement for you if you don't know already. If you don't know, now you know, right? I'm happy to say the first Jared Show Wisdom podcast came out yesterday. Today is Tuesday. It came out Monday. It's called Knowledge versus Wisdom, the first episode. I'm pretty excited about it. I hope both of these podcasts are going to help people navigate life, be entertaining, and be a step in the right direction for you guys and for me. The second episode of the Wisdom podcast comes out tomorrow on Wednesday. All of the podcasts, the knowledge, the wisdom, all of it, they all come out at 10 p.m. Eastern and 7 Pacific, so don't miss it. As for this episode, I'm letting my mind wander a bit into the what-if realm. You see, before I was even born, my parents set out on a road trip to California. They didn't make it, but it was quite the journey. I'll get into a little bit about that story. I don't want to put them out there that much, but I'll get into a little bit about that. As for me, I actually tried to do the same thing. I made it, but it took me 2 tries. The first time I only made it out to Colorado, and the second time I actually made it. And once I got to Cali, it wasn't what I expected. But what if I had grown up there? We'll wander out to meet that big old what if after this. Hey man, it's Jimmy, man. Living out in California. I gotta tell you about this dude I was listening to the other day, man. I think his name was Jared. Yeah, man, yeah. This guy blew my mind, man. You gotta check this dude out, man. He's a cool cat, and he's everywhere, man. Twitter, YouTube, and I heard he just started an Instagram. Watch out, man. He's like everywhere. Welcome back, and thank you, California Jimmy, man, for that enthusiastic shout out. Much thanks and greatly appreciated. I dig California Jimmy, and a nagging question in my mind was always California. It took me 2 tries to get out there, and I'll save those stories for another time. They're well worth it. Right now, I'd like to get into the story of my parents' road trip to California, so we can get into this idea of what if I had grown up in California. So let's get into it. Before I was born, my mom and my dad set out on a road trip to California. Now, my dad's pretty good. He's pretty handy. He's actually a handyman. He's taught me a lot as far as, how to use tools and how to build things. His dad taught him, and so on and so forth. So back in the day, let's say, my dad had this, I guess him and my mom had this bright idea that they were going to build an RV and so basically what he did is he took a trailer. I forget how big it was. I picture like a tiny house, kind of how big it was, and built his own RV on the back of this trailer, this axle. So think kind of fifth wheel, kind of tiny house kind of thing, but much more thrown together, if you will. There was a joke that was going that his dad said to him right before they went out. That dad said, "Hey man, we're going out like the Rolling Stones," and his dad was more like, "It sounds like you're gonna be more like stoned and rolling." I know, it's hilarious. It's dad joke, Jared. It's grandfather joke, right? Granddad joke. So bear with me. But he did it though. That was the thing. So he actually made it, and I don't think there's any pictures of it anywhere. I mean, this is back in the day. There's no cell phones and iPhones, and barely anybody had a camera. People just, it's hard to believe out there in social media, YouTube, and podcast land, but people actually just did things because they wanted to. Crazy, right? So yeah, that's what they did. They had this bright idea. They were going to go out there. And so they set off with barely any money, as the story goes. And right before they left, I think from what I had heard, they had, I think $80 or something in their pocket. Now you got to remember, back then gas was really cheap. Everything was pretty cheap, okay? So $80 then was probably like, I don't know, let's say, probably like $200, $300, $400, $500 now. Maybe let's say $500. I mean, not that much. More like $250, right? So they get out there, and they're getting ready to go. They got, let's say, $200 in their pocket or whatever, $250, and they decided that they needed to go get what's called a lid. Okay, it was called a lid back then. Now we might call it an OZ or an ounce. But they decided that they needed to spend some of their gas money on what they were doing, food money and everything, on going and getting some herb, right? And, I mean, they're wild and crazy kids, man, just going for it, living life, So they go get them a bag, and they head out on the road, and they got into all kinds of stuff. Suffice it to say that, especially back then, my dad was pretty much a hippie back then. My mom is still kind of a hippie, God bless her. Amazing woman. Still does her thing, still has her thing going on. Yeah, actually she is, she does a lot of gardening. Dad is not as much of a hippie. He was a little bit more, he's just laid back, let's put it that way. Yeah, my mom has always been the hippie person. I'd say she's never been a Grateful Dead person. She's always been more of a Rolling Stones or Led Zeppelin. Definitely Led Zeppelin, but or Eric Clapton. She's actually, her biggest deal is Allman Brothers, and I get that from her, and thank God that she passed it along. But she's still the hippie. She still does. I mean, not like brain dead hippie. She's more like conscious hippie. See what I mean? See what I'm doing there? So they get on the way, and they get into all kinds of different stuff. I think they actually, from what I had heard, they actually had, I think, Thanksgiving at a campground with some hot dogs and a whole deal. And there were some really good stories that came out of that whole thing. I listened to a bunch of them. Those are kind of my stories, so I'll kind of keep those to myself. Beautiful, amazing stories that you get to hear from your parents. By the way, if you are listening to this and you're, a younger person, ask your parents, man. Ask your parents stories. Ask them for stories of their life, and listen and enjoy it. You'd be surprised what you can get out of your parents, and you'd be surprised what your parents have done. Okay. And yeah, they were wild and crazy kids, but they made it as far as Texas. Okay. So they get to Texas, where my mom's sister was living at the time, and things just started to kind of unravel. And as they started unraveling, a lot of things were starting to unravel. And somehow or another, they ended up making it back to the East Coast, and where they had me. And unfortunately, they soon split up after that. My mom moved north, and my dad stayed in the south. But what was amazing is when I finally made it out to California, even though it took me 2 tries, they both flew out to see me. Of course, they flew out separately. I think Dad came 1 year, and then Mom came another. And they both loved it. I mean, especially my dad. He got all into it. My mom loved it too. Don't get me wrong. She was loving the scenery and the views and what was going on, where I was, and just the town I was living in. She absolutely loved it. So it sort of came full circle. I tried to do the same thing they did, and I failed the first time, and I finally made it the second time, and they finally came out. They finally made it the second time. They finally came out to California and were there and stood on the. So it's pretty awesome. It actually came full circle. And I don't think either one of them regrets not making it. But I don't think they mind really either way. I think, things have a way of working out. I think that things, I guess you could say, worked out just fine. I think things could have been different. I don't think better or worse. But, I tell you what, living in California, I lived in California for about 5 or 6 years. I get a pretty good sense of what life would actually have been like. And we're going to get into that next. Need a good laugh? Maybe a good cry? Somewhere in between? Hi there, Don Voiceover here, ready to offer you a new Instagram page you're just going to love. The Jared Show Instagram page. For the very low price of just a few clicks and a follow, you'll get Throwback Thursday. Yes, every Thursday the vault opens and you get a peek at a potentially embarrassing, funny, sad, heartwarming moment with the story to go with it. But wait, there's more. Every Tuesday, another post ranging anywhere from traveling pics and video to breathtaking beauty. And as a bonus, just for being part of the audience, there's one more post thrown in randomly throughout the week. That's right, for the dirt cheap price of a few clicks and a follow, you get Throwback Thursdays, new posts every Tuesday, and a random post you'll never see coming. Links in the description. Click and subscribe now. Welcome back to the Jared Show Knowledge Podcast. So what is it about California? Maybe it's an East Coast thing, right? Maybe it's a fantasy hyped up by TV, movies, music. If you're going to San Fran, right? Baywatch, Beverly Hillbillies, and so many more. I mean, so many more. You see this, even to this day. You see it all the time. Is that it? Why did I end up moving all the way to California? And why did they set out for the West Coast? Even before I was born. Go even further back. Why did so many hippies flock to San Fran in the 60s or Silicon Valley in the 80s? What is it about California? What is it about this state? Back in the day, it was, if you go way back in the 1800s and things, it was, the gold rush and that kind of deal. But, is that really it? Is it the quest to explore? Is it a Lewis and Clark innate idea in our DNA, in our minds that we have to travel west? Is that what it is? I think it is. For me, I think it was an adventure, a new start. It was freedom and determination, really. When I drove, I actually drove from East Coast to the West Coast in about 5 days, which I don't know if you know this or not. That's about 3,000 miles. And that's a lot of driving per day. I would drive sometimes 12, 14-hour days, to get out there. And it was interesting, but it was about the determination, the freedom. It was about the journey. It was about the adventure. I really wanted to wander. I just didn't have enough money to, like I said, I'll talk about this a little bit more in depth at some other point, my attempts at getting to California. But I basically took $1,400, had a surfboard that somebody had given me, put it in my car, and just went for it. And I just didn't have the money to wander. I just didn't have the money to have too much adventure. Really, it wasn't that I didn't have enough money. I just didn't know what I was doing. I'd never lived in a car or vehicle. I'd never been in that situation before. And to put myself into such a raw situation and to be in so many crazy different situations and places was eye-opening, and it taught me a lot, and it helped me grow a lot and become someone that I hadn't been yet. Helped me grow up a little bit too. So while I don't have all the time to share my thoughts on California as a whole right now, And here's the thing, like I said, it is a bit colder than you think, especially the water. And I said that if you would listen to the podcast on Sunday, you'd hear me going off about how you have to wear a wetsuit and all these kind of things just to go in the water, and that is extremely true. Anybody that lives in California will tell you that. So don't, when you're watching, like I said in the last podcast, I'm gonna say it again because it's worth repeating. If you're watching Baywatch or you're watching all this stuff where they're gallivanting in the water and all that stuff, don't let that fool you, because that water is some kind of cold. Okay. But like I said, I don't have time to go into everything I feel about California. We'll get into a little bit more, but I will say this, that there is some truth in the fantasy of California. I lived in the middle of California, and it was pretty chilly. It wasn't as cold as it could have been, but I did spend some time in LA and traveled to San Francisco quite a few times for basketball games and exploring, sightseeing. I even went to Disneyland, which was amazing. Thank you to the Carey crew for making that possible. Definitely a dream come true, especially the wizard hat moment at the end of the night. You guys know what I'm talking about. Anyway, yeah, I mean, I've done the California thing, and so I have pretty good insight. And the thing that's different, though, is if you grew up there. When you go to a new place, it's hard to kind of fit in. I happened to meet this guy, knew this guy named Matt. I always call Matt the quintessential Cali dude. And I mean that endearingly. I mean, he's a good dude. He's a good guy. But he's just, what you would think of when you think of California, which is a great thing. He, smokes weed, surfs. He used to have dreadlocks a while back, a couple years back. And he's just a stand-up guy. Great guy, great dad, great hard worker, willing to get up and go surfing at the crack of dawn, teaches volleyball. I think he taught baseball or something to that effect. I think he taught another sport as well. But just a stand-up guy. I mean, anybody would want to emulate, great dude. He did not talk like Cali Jimmy, man. He didn't talk like that at all. He was a good dude. I liked Matt a lot. And I really envisioned myself being a lot like Matt if I had grown up there. And that's definitely not a bad thing. But just because I envisioned that, is it true? Would I actually have become somebody like Matt? Who we are is somewhat, mostly, really, shaped by our environment, but not all of it. Quite a bit of it is, but not all of it. Growing up, me personally, I was quite shy, pretty oblivious when it came to any kind of self-awareness. Think girls, sex, and reading people in general. I mean, I was just a bad judge of character, and had no idea when it come to any kind of subtleties in language, talking to girls. I mean, just oblivious. And I'm going to do a whole nother podcast on that idea, because I have something I want to say about that. But, yeah, I was just shy, didn't know much. I was always pretty easygoing and laid back. So what would I have become if I lived in California? What would I become? Would I become Matt? Would I become, surfer dude like Matthew McConaughey on, in the movies, By the way, those two people are two different people. There really is a guy named Matt, and he really is that dude, and he's a great guy. Great basketball player, actually. Played basketball with him a couple times. Multi-talented, good dude. Hope him and his family are doing well. I heard that his wife, who's a nurse, might have the Rona, and so I have to pray for them. But yeah, stand-up dude. So would I have become somebody like Matt, or more like myself? We're gonna get into that right after this last commercial. Hey there, Jared here. I just want to let you know about another podcast that I do called The Jared Show Wisdom Podcast. On that podcast, you'll get a chance to hear some answers I've found while navigating life and finding purpose in the world. We have fun on this podcast, but if you're looking for something a bit more substantial, go check it out. New episodes every Monday and Wednesday at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. A link is in the description. I hope you'll join me in striving to live this life to its fullest and most meaningful by learning more. And welcome back to the Jared Show Knowledge Podcast. If you haven't got a chance to check out the other podcast called the Jared Show Wisdom Podcast, go check it out after this one. A link is in the description. So, who would I be? What would I be like if I'd grown up in California? Would I be like Matt? Would I be a movie star or a beach bum? I think it all depends on what part of Cali you grow up. North is way different than the South. Think San Fran versus LA. Better yet, think Northeastern versus Southeastern. Totally different places to be and to grow up. Southern, I would probably definitely be a beach bum. I mean, really, I gotta say that. I've been to Huntington Beach, I've been to Hermosa and Redondo and Manhattan and Venice Beach. I've been to all of those places. I've never been to Laguna Beach or Newport Beach, but I think further south I ever went was Huntington. But Huntington was good enough, man. I was with it. There's a good story that goes with that, but let's just suffice it to say that I was burnt to a crisp when I went to Huntington Beach. But it was still worth it. It was amazing. Huntington Beach is a great place. So is Hermosa, one of my favorites. If you get a chance, go check out a little place called Mickey's down there in Hermosa. But no endorsement on that place at all. Just a little something to say. But yeah, there's some really good beaches, and I would probably be a beach bum if I grew up in Southern California. I've never been to San Diego, and I would love to go, given the right opportunity, the right chance, and the right reasons. There seems to be I need a purpose, a reason to go, and do the things that I do. So yeah, given the right reason, the right purpose, the right timing, I'd love to go to San Diego and check it out. But chances are, growing up in Southern California, I would definitely be a beach bum. I'd be kind of hanging out. Sometimes I watch a little bit too much Baywatch, and I think like I'd be a lifeguard. I tell you what, honestly, if I was 20-something, I'm not 20-something, but if I was, just barely in my 20s, I would rethink, trekking out to the old beach and putting on the red swim trunks and being part of the old Baywatch. I would definitely do that. I think I could still do it if I absolutely wanted to. I just have other things to do, so I think that ship has sailed. But I am working on fitness and getting healthy and that kind of thing. But I do think that ship has sailed. If I was, like I said, if I was early 20s, I would definitely, had nothing else going on. If you get inspired by that and you decide you want to go be a lifeguard, go for it, man. Gorge yourself on Baywatch and get inspired and go do something really fun, really cool in life. But here's the thing, man. And maybe I would be, even if I was a beach bum, maybe that would parlay into being a pro surfer. Maybe an actor or a musician. I don't know. I mean, that's where Hollywood is. That's where all those things are. The other thing is, I'll tell you about this, is in California, the waves are way bigger. I mean, they're 4 to 6 feet, 6 to 8 feet. If you go in the right places at the right times, they're 20 feet. And from what I've heard, I've never personally seen a 20-foot wave, but I've heard some pretty good things. Maybe that's the same thing as a fisherman's tale, as a surfer's tale. Of, oh man, I saw 20-foot waves. Okay, California Jimmy, calm down, buddy. But yeah, I mean, I I think I would be somewhere around there. If I grew up in Northern California, I would probably be, I don't know, maybe growing weed. I don't know. I would think probably I'd be a big pothead, growing weed, living off the land, while still probably looking for my next wave or mountain to ski or snowboard. I think I didn't have a whole lot of experience in those different places. I have been to Weed, California, and I have been through all those different places. I would think that stereotype would actually prove to be true in that, for instance. But there are a lot of factors that go into it. California is a big state, and where you grow up plays a big part in what kind of characters traits you acquire. So overall, I think I'm happy with how things turned out. I think things could have been different, maybe better, maybe worse. But I have to say that very few things would I have changed about how I was raised. I would change a couple of things here and there, but very few and far in between. So what's the moral of the story, Morning Glory? I look at it like this, and I want you to perk your ears up and listen to this for a second. Our childhood only defines who we are and who we'll become if we allow it to. We can reinvent ourselves and start over from scratch, or allow the experience we have in our lives to create a new person. Very few of us are the same person we were when we were growing up. Growth and change happen naturally. If you don't like your childhood, and you don't like who you are now, change it. There's still time. And it's a process. It's something that you do every day. If you like your childhood, I like most of my childhood. There are points. I think everybody has at least some points in their childhood they didn't like. But overall, for the most part, I did like my childhood. And if you did like your childhood, hold on to the best parts and still allow for change and growth in who you are, your personality, and your likes and dislikes, and you as a person. There was a time where I did not like broccoli. I did not like peppers and onions. I still hate onions, but peppers are not so bad. Broccoli, I actually love broccoli. Broccoli's great. So, people change, things change, taste buds change. We grow, we evolve naturally. We adapt to certain situations and environments. We're supposed to. Your childhood can mold and shape who you are if you allow it to. If you want it to, you can. As for me, I have, I think, pulled the parts of my childhood through with me and allowed the experiences I've had to change kind of who I am and what I'm capable of in life, and trying to grow and learn more and get better. That's what life's all about, is trying to grow and get better at everything that you do every day. That's really what it's about. And I tell you what, let me know on Instagram what you think. Would you rather have grown up somewhere else? If so, where and why? Would you have rather grown up in London or Paris, Texas, or, who knows? Maybe New York City or LA. Maybe you wanted to grow up in a big city because you wanted things to happen. You got sick and bored of where you live now and growing up in small town, middle town America. Maybe you want to grow up in small town, middle town America because where you grew up in the hood was dangerous, Grass is always greener, but not necessarily, right? And not everybody thinks that way either. Right? So what do you think about it? Check me out on Instagram. You can go check out The Jared Show on Instagram. And while you're there, check out Throwback Thursdays. See a little bit of my upbringing, my vault. Be sure to stay tuned for the next episode on Sunday at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. Next week, we'll get into what a wild, weird world we live in. We can get into that on Sunday. And why I think 2020 is actually a good year. We can get into that on Tuesday. Be sure to check out the new Wisdom Podcast episode tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Thank you for listening, and as always, may God bless you.
The Jared Show.